Imagine waking up to the same kind of morning you've lived your whole life. The sun rises warm over the horizon. The sound of birds fills the sky. You stretch, breathe, and feel safe. The world feels predictable. The same routines, the same river, the same sense of normal. Now imagine, in less than 10 seconds, that sense of safety is ripped away. Imagine being pulled from the world you know into a nightmare you never imagined. That's exactly what happened to Virginia Nyoni, a 45-year-old mother of 6 from Zimbabwe. On the morning of May 2nd, 2025, she walked down to the river to fetch water, just as she had done countless times before. But that morning, something ancient was waiting beneath the surface. Something with jaws built to crush bone, patience to outlast fear, and instincts older than human history. A crocodile. The attack that followed wasn't just another wildlife encounter. It was a test of love, of courage, of what it truly means to fight for life when everything is on the line. Because when the crocodile dragged Virginia into the water, her husband, Oliver Nyoni, didn't run. He didn't freeze. He did what almost no one would dare to do. He jumped into the jaws of danger. This story isn't just about survival. It's about you. It's about how we all face our own crocodiles. Fear, failure, doubt, and how, in the moments that define us, we either freeze or fight. Welcome to our channel. Before moving further, like the video and subscribe the channel. Before we get to the moment of the attack, you need to understand the world Virginia lived in. Because context matters. When you see where she came from, the weight of what happened to her becomes even more powerful. Virginia lived in Msunakanjiza village, tucked inside Wang district, Zimbabwe. It's the kind of place that doesn't make headlines. Small, rural, and often forgotten by the outside world. But for the people who live there, it's everything. It's home. And like so many villages across Africa, the river was the heartbeat of daily life. The Deka River, a tributary of the mighty Zambezi, was both friend and foe. It gave water to drink, a place to wash, a source of fish. But it also carried a silent threat: crocodiles. Everyone knew they were there. Everyone knew the risk. But when you have no tap water, no infrastructure, no other choice, you live with danger as if it's normal. Now pause for a second. I want you to really picture that. For most of us, water comes from a kitchen sink. We don't even think twice. You twist a knob and it's there. Clean, safe, instant. But imagine if every time you needed water, you had to weigh that against the possibility of death. Imagine telling yourself, I might get attacked today, but my kids still need to drink. That was Virginia's reality. That was her everyday. And that's something we, sitting comfortably behind screens, often forget. Normal for one person can mean survival-level risk for another. Virginia herself was no stranger to resilience. At 45 years old, she had already lived a life full of responsibility. She was a wife, a mother of 6, and part of a community that relied on her. In villages like Kanjiza, people don't live for themselves alone. Every action, every chore, every decision is tied to family and neighbors. When she walked to that river on May 2nd, 2025, she wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about what her children needed, about how her family would eat, drink, and go about their day. And this is where I want you to stop and reflect on your own life. Because here's the truth. We all have rivers we keep walking to. Maybe not literal ones with crocodiles, but symbolic ones. Daily routines, comfort zones, habits we never question. And lurking underneath, there are always risks. Wasted time, lost potential, even hidden dangers we ignore because that's just how it's always been. Here's the kicker. Normal is not always safe. Normal can lull you into thinking you're untouchable, that today will be the same as yesterday. But life doesn't work like that. Normal can flip in an instant. Virginia's story forces us to see this contrast. To her, fetching water was routine. To us, it sounds like a chore. To the crocodile, it was opportunity. And in that space between what we expect and what actually happens, that's where identity shifts are born. Because think about it. If you knew that something dangerous was waiting at your version of the river, how would you show up differently? Would you pay more attention? Would you prepare? Would you bring someone with you? Or would you keep pretending it wasn't there, hoping danger never noticed you? Life is exactly like that crocodile-infested river. We live beside risks every day. Maybe in our careers, maybe in our relationships, maybe in our health. Most of us think, it won't be me. It won't happen today. But Virginia's story whispers back. What if it is you? What if it is today? That's why this first part of her story matters. Because before we talk about the attack, before we relive the blood and terror, we need to understand how ordinary it all was. How this wasn't a safari adventure or some reckless stunt. It was a woman doing what she had always done. And that's what makes it so terrifying and so relatable. Because just like Virginia, we all live in routines. We all take rivers for granted. Until the moment they turn against us. It was May 2nd, 2025. Just another morning in Kanjiza village. The sky was already bright when Virginia Nyoni, 45 years old, walked to the river. She carried the same containers she always used. Her body knew the path by heart. The dusty track winding down to the bank. The feel of the earth beneath her feet. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing warned her of what was about to come. But the river was never truly calm. Beneath its surface, something stirred. A crocodile, silent and ancient, waited. Crocodiles don't chase. They don't roar before striking. They calculate. They stalk. They wait until your guard is at its lowest. And Virginia, like everyone in her village, had no choice but to be vulnerable. She leaned down to collect water. The surface shimmered, deceptively peaceful. And then, in a split second, that peace shattered. The crocodile lunged out of the water, its jaws clamping down on her leg with a force that can crush bone like dry sticks. There was no time to scream, no time to fight back. It yanked her with terrifying speed, dragging her into the river. Imagine that for a moment. 1 second you're standing on the bank, the next you're 30 meters into the water, your body flailing, lungs burning, and death pulling you under. That was Virginia's reality. Her hand tore against the reptile's teeth. Her thigh was ripped open. Blood clouded the water. Villagers nearby screamed, but froze. And let's be honest, you probably would too. Because when a crocodile attacks, there's no playbook. Most people think, this is the end. Here's the thing. Crocodiles aren't like lions or leopards. They don't kill quickly. They kill slowly. They pull their prey into the water, rolling and thrashing until lungs fill with water. Survival? Almost impossible. And that's the psychological dagger here. Because if you've ever faced something overwhelming in your own life, a job loss, a heartbreak, a crushing failure, you know that feeling. The pull into darkness, the spinning, the thought, there's no way out of this. That's what Virginia was living in real time. The odds weren't just against her, they were stacked like a mountain. But this is where the story pivots. Because as hopeless as it seemed, Virginia wasn't alone. Standing on the bank was her husband, Oliver Nyoni. He saw the water erupt, saw his wife's body dragged and battered, and he had a choice. Most people would freeze. Some might run for help. Others might look away because the danger feels too big. And that's the same choice you face when life's crocodiles grab hold of you or the people you love. Do you step in, or do you step back? Oliver didn't hesitate. The moment the crocodile dragged Virginia under, his identity shifted. He wasn't just a husband anymore. He wasn't just a villager. In that instant, he became something else. A warrior, a protector, a man willing to put his life between death and the woman he loved. He leapt into the river. And that moment, that leap, is why we're even telling this story today. Think about it. Most of us live waiting for the right moment to act, the perfect timing, the safer conditions, the guarantee of success. But the truth is, the defining moments of your life will never come with warnings. They'll hit like crocodiles. Sudden, violent, merciless. And in those moments, hesitation costs lives. For Virginia, hesitation would have cost her everything. But Oliver chose differently. Imagine watching the person you love most being dragged away by death itself. Not in slow motion, not in some metaphorical sense, but literally your wife, your partner, the mother of your children, ripped from the earth and pulled into the jaws of a predator. That was the scene before Oliver Nyoni. He stood on the bank of the Decca River, watching helplessly for a split second as Virginia was dragged under. Blood spread in the water. Her body vanished and reappeared as the crocodile thrashed. Villagers screamed, but no one moved. And in that moment, Oliver faced the question that every human eventually faces in some form. Do I run from the impossible or do I run toward it? Most people's instinct would be to step back, to protect themselves, to think of the 6 children who still needed their father. And nobody would blame him if he froze. That's human nature. But here's the truth. Love changes the equation. Oliver didn't freeze. He didn't calculate the odds. He didn't worry about statistics or what people would say if he failed. His body moved before his mind could catch up. He jumped into the river, into the same waters where a prehistoric killing machine had already claimed his wife. This is what I mean when I talk about identity shifting. Up until that moment, Oliver was a farmer, a villager, a family man. But in that instant, he became something different. He became the embodiment of courage, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he acted despite the fear. Think about that for your own life. How many times have you held back because fear whispered, "What if you fail?" How many times have you watched opportunities slip away because you waited for someone else to act first? Oliver didn't have that luxury. He couldn't afford hesitation. And maybe, just maybe, neither can you. Now, imagine the scene as he hit the water. The cold river swallowed him. Adrenaline surged through his body. He saw the crocodile's tail thrashing, its body twisting, Virginia's face flashing above and below the surface. Without a weapon, without backup, Oliver swam straight for it. He started punching the crocodile, striking it with everything he had. His fists landed against its armored body, against its head, against the muscles that had evolved to withstand centuries of violence. Every strike was an act of defiance. Every strike screamed, "You will not take her." The crocodile fought back, pulled harder, twisting Virginia's body in its jaws. But Oliver didn't let go. He clawed at its face. He yelled. He struck again and again. Imagine the raw chaos of that fight. Man versus beast, bare skin against scales, love against instinct. And here's the detail that makes your heart stop. At one point, Oliver actually managed to pry at the crocodile's mouth, forcing it to loosen its grip just enough for Virginia to gasp for air. That's when he realized he wasn't just fighting for survival, he was buying seconds. Seconds that meant the difference between life and death. Finally, whether from Oliver's relentless blows or sheer chance, the crocodile released its hold. Virginia, bleeding and broken, floated free. For most people, that would have been the end of the fight. Rescue achieved. Retreat while you can. But life doesn't work like that, and neither do crocodiles. As Oliver pulled Virginia toward the bank, the crocodile circled back. It wasn't finished. It lunged again, jaws snapping, hunger not yet satisfied. And this, right here, is where Oliver's courage transcended human instinct. Because instead of retreating, instead of dragging Virginia away as fast as possible, he turned to face the predator head-on. He charged toward it, shouting, splashing, arms wide like a man possessed. His defiance startled the crocodile just enough, startled it into retreat. And in that space of hesitation, Oliver secured their escape. Let that sink in for a second. He didn't just save his wife from a crocodile. He stared death in the face twice and refused to give in. This is the kind of moment that redefines identity. It's the kind of moment that shows us courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action in the face of it. And here's where it matters for you. Your crocodiles might not have scales or teeth. They might look like self-doubt, procrastination, or the fear of failure. But the principle is the same. You can freeze. You can watch life drag away the things you care about. Or you can jump in, fist swinging, heart on fire, determined to win back what matters most. That's what Oliver did. That's what makes this story more than just a wildlife encounter. It's a mirror, showing us what we're capable of when love and purpose become stronger than fear. And yet, this fight, as epic as it was, wasn't the end. Because once they reached the shore, another battle began. A slower, more devastating fight that no fists could win. That fight was for Virginia's life, and it stretched on day after day for nearly 2 weeks. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Oliver's fists had done the impossible. The crocodile released its grip, and Virginia's body floated free, bleeding, gasping, alive. He grabbed her under the arms, pulling her toward the bank. Every stroke of his legs felt heavier than the last, every second stretching into eternity. His chest burned. His muscles screamed. But love is stronger than exhaustion. Yet even as they moved toward safety, the river had not finished its test. Crocodiles aren't like lightning. They don't strike once and disappear. They're relentless, patient, hungry, and as Oliver pulled Virginia through the water, the predator circled back, cutting through the current like a shadow. It wasn't retreating, it was regrouping. Imagine that. You've just fought a monster with your bare hands. You've somehow won a miracle. And instead of letting you leave, the monster comes back for more. That's life, isn't it? You think you've conquered a problem. Maybe you've beaten procrastination, landed a new job, healed from a breakup, only to find the challenge creeping back again. The crocodile of doubt. The crocodile of fear. The crocodile of not enough. Problems rarely vanish after the first punch. They circle back. They test your resolve a second time, a third time, until you prove you're not just lucky. You're unbreakable. That's exactly what Oliver faced. Dragging Virginia closer to shore, he saw the crocodile's body arc through the water again. Villagers screamed warnings from the bank. But he didn't need them. He felt it. The current shifting. The dread returning. And he knew this wasn't over. So he made a choice that defied logic. Instead of sprinting for the shore, instead of clinging to safety, Oliver turned back toward the danger. He placed Virginia behind him and charged the crocodile head-on. Think about that. A man, barehanded, bleeding himself, standing between his wife and a predator that had killed countless animals and humans before. He raised his arms, shouting, thrashing in the water, making himself look larger, louder, bolder than his fear. And something extraordinary happened. The crocodile hesitated. For the first time, the hunter became unsure. This wasn't how prey behaved. Prey usually begged for life. Prey usually ran. But Oliver didn't act like prey. He acted like a force. And that hesitation was all he needed. With a burst of energy, he pulled Virginia the last few meters toward the shore. When they finally collapsed on the riverbank, the world went silent. The water stilled. The crocodile slid back into the depths, watching but no longer attacking. The battle was over, at least for that day. Virginia lay trembling, her thigh ripped open, her hand mangled, blood soaking the earth beneath her. She was alive, but barely. Her breaths were shallow, her eyes wide with shock, her body weak. Oliver knelt beside her, clutching her hand, whispering promises she might not have even heard. You're safe. I've got you. We're not done yet. And here's the brutal truth. Escaping the crocodile was only the beginning, because wounds like hers don't heal easily. They fester. They weaken. They demand strength long after the adrenaline fades. That's the lesson here for all of us. Surviving the first strike isn't the end of the journey. It's the start of a longer one. Maybe you've overcome your crocodile moment. You quit a toxic job. You walked away from a bad relationship. You pulled yourself out of depression. But healing doesn't happen the moment you crawl onto dry land. Healing takes time, patience, community, and sometimes, even when you've escaped the water, the battle still rages inside you. For Oliver and Virginia, that truth became painfully real in the days to follow. She had escaped the jaws of the beast, but her fight for life and his fight to keep her alive had only just begun. And here's the empowering part for you. Every time you survive something you thought would break you, remember, the crocodile will always circle back. Doubt will always try again. But if you stood once, you can stand again. If you fought once, you can fight again. And every time you face it, you grow less like prey and more like the predator of your own destiny. Virginia's narrow escape wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of a new chapter. One that would stretch on for 12 more days of struggle, pain, and hope. The river was finally behind them. The jaws had unclenched, the water had stilled, and the villagers gathered around in shock. But as Virginia lay on the ground, gasping, bleeding, trembling, it became painfully clear. The fight was far from over. Her right thigh was torn open, deep gashes exposing muscle and veins. Her left hand had been shredded by teeth designed to break bone. Blood soaked her dress, pooling into the dirt beneath her. Every breath was shallow, every movement fragile. She had escaped death, but death wasn't finished with her yet. The villagers acted quickly. Makeshift bandages were tied around her wounds. Oliver, still dripping wet, refused to leave her side. He carried her into a cart, then onto a vehicle that would rush her to St. Patrick's Hospital in Wang, nearly 30 kilometers away. Imagine that ride. Every bump in the road sending shocks of pain through her body. Every passing minute a gamble against time. And Oliver, sitting beside her, holding her bloodied hand, whispering prayers, not knowing if each breath she took might be her last. When they finally arrived, doctors and nurses rushed to stabilize her. Stitches for drips, painkillers, everything to keep her alive. But the damage was catastrophic. Crocodile bites are among the most dangerous wounds on Earth, not just because of the crushing force, but because of the bacteria carried in their mouths. Infection is almost guaranteed. Virginia was 45 years old. She had lived through droughts, hardships, the endless struggle of raising 6 children in rural Zimbabwe. But nothing compared to this. Now, every day was a battle between her body's will to heal and the infection threatening to spread. For the first few days there was hope. She was conscious. She could speak in whispers. She even told Oliver that she was grateful. Grateful to be alive. Grateful that he had not let go. The children visited, their faces pressed with fear but shining with love. For a moment it seemed like she might pull through. But healing, like life, is never linear. By the 4th day, her wounds began to swell. Fevers spiked. Her body grew weak. Her appetite vanished. Doctors tried antibiotics, but the bacteria were merciless. And Oliver, who had fought a crocodile with his bare hands, now found himself facing an enemy he could not punch, could not outswim, could not frighten into retreat. That's the cruelest part of this story. You can summon every ounce of courage, every fist, every scream in the face of danger, and still find yourself powerless against the quiet, invisible battles. And isn't that what life does to us, too? We conquer the obvious battles, the heartbreaks, the failures, the betrayals, only to discover the real test is the slow erosion of our spirit in the days afterward. Day 7. Virginia was slipping. Her body was frail. The nurses said little, but their eyes said everything. Oliver prayed harder. The children clung to hope because what else could they do? She was their mother. She was their world. By day 10, her body had grown cold despite the heat of Zimbabwe. Her breath shallow, her voice gone. Oliver held her hand and begged her to fight, the same way he had fought in the river. But not every battle can be won. On May 14, 2025, 12 days after the crocodile attack, Virginia took her final breath. She died in the hospital, her husband by her side, her children nearby. The woman who had woken up on May 2nd expecting an ordinary day, the woman who had lived through the impossible, finally surrendered to a fight no human could endure forever. And here's the hardest truth. Sometimes, even when we give everything, we still lose the people we love. Even when we jump into the river, even when we punch the crocodile, even when we pray with all our might, life reminds us that it doesn't always bend to our will. But that doesn't mean the fight was meaningless. In fact, the opposite is true. Because in those 12 days, Virginia lived surrounded by love. She saw her children's faces again. She heard her husband's voice, steady and loyal, promising never to let go. She didn't die in the jaws of the river. She died in the arms of her family. And that matters. And for you watching this, hearing this story, remember this: you can't always control the outcome of your battles, but you can control whether you fight. You can control whether you step in when it matters. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't in living forever. It's in knowing you didn't give up when love was on the line. Virginia's story didn't end in the river. It ended with dignity, with love, with courage reflected in the man who refused to let her go. And that's a legacy more powerful than any crocodile. When a life ends, especially in such a brutal and sudden way, it's natural to ask, what now? The villagers of Kanjiza gathered in mourning. News of the attack spread quickly across Wang district and beyond. Newspapers wrote headlines, radio stations told the story. And in every retelling, one truth stood out. This wasn't just a crocodile attack. It was the story of a husband who jumped into death's jaws for love, and a wife who fought for 12 days with courage most of us can barely imagine. Virginia Nyoni was no longer just a villager, or a mother or a wife. She became a symbol. For her 6 children, the legacy was personal. They would grow up knowing their mother's life ended in tragedy, but her story carried something far greater: resilience, bravery, and sacrifice. They could say, "Our father fought a crocodile for our mother. Our mother lived her last days surrounded by love." That's not just history. That's identity shaping. And that's important to recognize, because we all build our identity from the stories passed down to us. Maybe your family told you stories of struggle, of survival through wars or poverty. Maybe you inherited stories of strength or stories of fear. The narratives we carry shape the way we see ourselves. And for Virginia's children, her story is a legacy of courage. But the impact didn't stop with them. In Kanjiza village, people began to see the river differently. For generations, the river had been both life and danger, a source of water and a home for crocodiles. After Virginia's death, it became a reminder of respect. Mothers warned their children with new urgency. Be careful. Remember Virginia. Husbands held their wives tighter at night. Villagers carried the story as a kind of communal scar, a wound that bound them together. And for those beyond Zimbabwe, for all of us watching this story now, Virginia's legacy is something universal. Because here's the truth. Very few of us will ever face a crocodile in real life, but all of us will face our own version of it. Maybe it won't have scales and teeth, but it will feel just as terrifying. The job that breaks you, the illness that steals your strength, the failure that drowns your confidence, the heartbreak that rips you apart. And in those moments, this story whispers to us, don't freeze. Don't surrender. Fight for what matters most. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Remember Oliver's leap into the river? That wasn't just an act of desperation. That was a choice. A choice to step into danger because love demanded it. And you have the same choice in your life. Maybe not against crocodiles, but against comfort, against apathy, against staying small when you were born to live big. Ask yourself, when your moment comes, will you step back? Or will you leap forward? That's what legacy is really about. It's not just the story of someone who lived. It's the question their story plants in you. Virginia's story plants this question. What would you do for love? What would you do for courage? And are you willing to fight even when the odds say you can't win? Her death was tragic. Her wounds were devastating. But her story is alive because we're still telling it. And every time it's told, her courage multiplies. Every time someone hears it, another person is reminded that they, too, can fight back against the crocodiles in their life. And that's the greatest victory of all. Because crocodiles can take bodies, but they can't take legacies. Virginia's life was more than the way she died. It was in the love she raised in her children, the courage she awakened in her husband, and the inspiration she left for all of us. And in that way, her story didn't end in May 2025. Continues now, in you, in me, in everyone who chooses courage when fear strikes. But before we close this chapter, there's one more piece of the story. Because after every tragedy, there's always a question that lingers. What happened to the crocodile? And that, my friends, is where the final chapter begins. When tragedy strikes, we don't just mourn the victim. We also look for justice, closure, some kind of ending that tells us the monster has been dealt with. So naturally, after Virginia's death, the question spread, what happened to the crocodile? In Zimbabwe, crocodiles that attack humans are often hunted down by wildlife authorities. Sometimes they're captured, sometimes killed, and in some cases their bodies are cut open to confirm the evidence of their attack. It's part justice, part protection, because once a crocodile tastes human flesh, the fear is that it will return for more. Reports from the Wang district suggested that the Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Management Authority was notified. Rangers searched the riverbanks, tracking the predator that had scarred the community. For days there was tension in the air. Villagers avoided the river. Parents warned their children not to go near the water. Every ripple, every shadow carried terror. And here's the sobering reality. Crocodiles rarely disappear. They return to the same hunting grounds, patient and territorial. Which means, for the authorities, it wasn't a matter of if they'd find it, but when. When the crocodile was eventually located, the outcome was brutal but inevitable. It was killed by rangers. A life for a life. Now, some might feel relief in that. The predator was gone. The danger removed. But others felt a strange sadness, even conflict. Because the crocodile wasn't evil. It wasn't a villain plotting against humanity. It was just being what it was created to be. A hunter, a survivor, a creature of instinct. And that's where the deeper lesson lies. Life's crocodiles, the fears, the failures, the setbacks, they're not evil either. They're not out to destroy you out of malice. They're just part of existence. Fear is natural. Failure is inevitable. Loss is unavoidable. These crocodiles circle all of us. But whether they devour us, or whether we rise above them, depends not on their nature, but on ours. Virginia didn't choose the attack. She didn't invite it. But in the face of it, she fought. And Oliver, he chose to fight harder. He chose to rewrite the script. He chose to turn prey into protector, victim into warrior. And here's the truth for you. The crocodiles in your life may never go away completely. You might beat one, and another will appear. You might think you've escaped doubt, and then it circles back. You might think you've conquered fear, only to face it again in a different form. But like the rangers who finally ended the predator's reign, you have the power to end cycles too. You have the power to decide, this stops here. This crocodile doesn't get another day of my life. Maybe for you, the crocodile is procrastination. Maybe it's self-doubt. Maybe it's the voice that says you're not enough. And maybe it's time to hunt it down, to kill it metaphorically so you can live free. The death of the crocodile in Zimbabwe didn't bring Virginia back. It didn't erase the scars from Oliver's arms or the grief from her children's faces. But it gave the community a sense of safety. It gave them permission to return to the river, to fetch water, to live without constant fear. And isn't that what we all need? To know that, no matter what life throws at us, we can fight back. We can reclaim our rivers. We can keep living even after tragedy. Virginia's story ends with her passing on May 14, 2025. The crocodile story ends with its death shortly after. But your story, the one you're living right now, is still being written. And every day, you face the choice. Will you let the crocodiles of fear and doubt drag you under? Or will you fight, survive, and leave behind a legacy that outlives you? Because if there's one truth that echoes through this tragedy, it's this. You may not get to choose the battles you face, but you always get to choose how you fight them. And in that choice, like Oliver, like Virginia, you decide what kind of legacy you leave behind.